On this exciting episode, a complicated case involving LA's burgeoning fan dancing scene has Perry seeing double. Luckily, he knows how to ease his troubled mind. Grab some records off the shelf of his local store and grab a listening booth. It's Season 1, Episode 15 of Perry Mason, The Case of the Fan Dancer's Horse. Welcome to the 15th episode of the Perry Pod. I'm your humble host, Jonathan Searcy, and my purpose here is pretty simple. Provide an audio companion to the greatest legal drama in television history, Perry Mason. I plan to do a pod for every episode of the television series, and if time permits, to cover some of those made-for-TV movies too. I'll be working through the series in the order in which the episodes were aired. Each week, I'll give a brief refresher on the plot, and if the episode was based on a novel, I'll compare the book with its television adaptation. Next, I'll list some key pieces of trivia, as well as tackle the episode's main theme. We'll feature a Perry proverb, a moment of wisdom from the man himself, and then we'll finish with a post-case water cooler, where just like Perry, Della, and Paul, we can rehash the ins and outs of their adventures. But first, to the law library! Each week in the law library, we return to prior cases to refresh our memories about Perry's past so we can find fresh precedents for future cases. Last time, in the case of the baited hook, our intrepid hero solved the case without having to enter the courtroom. When paired with the episode that aired before that, the case of the moth-eaten mink, which had only one witness in court, we've got one witness across two cases. It's not that Perry's not doing work, it's just that this paucity of courtroom scenes emphasizes the fact that Perry has always been as much a detective as he has been a lawyer. In fact, scholar Thomas Leitch argues that Earl Stanley Gardner's real innovation with the original Mason character was merging a detective's instincts with a lawyer's rhetorical and legal skill. At his best, Perry does more than solve murders. In Leitch's words, Mason, quote, reconciles a view of the law as contingent and purely tactical with a view of the law as morally authoritative, end quote. That is, Perry manages to both bend the legal rules and preserve justice, which those rules are meant to preserve. This important work is simply less apparent when Perry's not doing overtly legal stuff. The tension between Perry as detective and Perry as lawyer will keep coming up throughout the series, so we'll keep our eyes on it as well. Now to this week's episode. The Case of the Fan Dancer's Horse. This was the first show filmed after the Perry Mason show was picked up. Producer Ben Brady and director William Russell sure did this one up in style. As is typical in these early Perry episodes, our lawyer hero makes his way to location after location. A hotel, a nightclub, a local diner, a ranch, a record store, and even the apartment of one of the episode's two fan dancers. Before the first commercial break, we see a mysterious man on a horse fail in a burglary attempt. This, we will find out, is Jasper Fenton, the bad check-writing brother of our defendant Lois. The next thing we know, we're on a rural road with Perry and Della as they witness a car accident.
Perry, he's gonna hit that old car up ahead. It's turning over!
While a Spanish-speaking man whisks away an injured woman, Perry discovers the working wardrobe of a fan dancer, 2 ostrich plumes and a pair of pumps that belong to one Sherry Chi-Chi.
These and the feathers are somebody's complete wardrobe.
A fan dancer, maybe.
Ooh la la! Perry finds himself at the center of a divorce case when he places an ambiguous ad in the paper to try and return the plumes and shoes. John Callender, a wealthy rancher, thinks Perry has the horse we saw at the episode's opening.
What I found scarcely answers that description.
Mister, I raised that horse. I ought to know its description.
Good afternoon, Mr. Callender.
He's the estranged husband of Lois Fenton, who wants out of the marriage. Shocking for Perry, a dysfunctional marriage. Callender holds a trump card on Lois, however, proof that Lois's brother wrote bad checks, and further confirmed by the horse that Jasper was riding in the episode's opening, where he tried to retrieve those checks from Callender without him knowing. To make matters more complicated, Lois has a doppelganger. When Lois married, she gave up her fan dancing stage name to Irene Kilby, a similar-looking fan dancer on the make.
You found 2 fans. 2 ostrich plume fans with the initials LF on them and a pair of high-heeled slippers.
Callender bought Kilby's loyalty, and now Lois has an uphill climb to reclaim the fan dancing throne that was once hers. She isn't doing it alone, though. She has a howdy-doody type named Arthur Sheldon looking smitten with her and similarly consternated on her behalf. It's Sheldon who tries to get Mason to take Lois's case.
She needs help. Will you represent her?
What kind of help?
She and her brother need the most important criminal lawyer in California. You, Mr. Mason. I haven't got much money, but I can...
I asked you what kind of help.
Protection from Callender.
Someone definitely needs a lawyer after Callender ends up dead, thanks to a Japanese sword in his belly. Paul Drake's men play a key role as Mason has them staked across the hall from Callender's hotel room, the scene of the crime.
We're boxed. Within seconds, the desk will notify homicide. We can't run out of here now without sticking our necks in a noose, and we can't stay without being discovered.
On account of a house stick.
Yeah, they'll find out we paid him $20 to let you hide in the mop closet. That ties us right in.
It's Drake's operative Faulkner who offers key testimony that looks like it will convict Perry's client Lois. But once again, the state played fast and loose with the facts. On cross-examination, Perry realizes that 2 different women were brought into the police shadow box for Faulkner to identify. This means that Faulkner could have and actually did end up seeing Irene Kilby, not the defendant, go into the hotel room.
This woman was arrested as Lois Fenton. She was identified by the witnesses. A few minutes after that identification, the police arrested the real Lois Fenton. So Sergeant Holcomb asked the witnesses to see the girl again under better circumstances.
So who's to blame? A rotten cop, Sergeant Holcomb. Conspicuously, we never see him on the series again. Perry does so thorough a job in the courtroom that in a first, I certainly can't think of another instance of this, the judge orders the jury to return a not guilty verdict even when Perry is yet to produce the real killer.
Mr. Berger, on the basis of Miss Kilby's testimony, it appears your case against the defendant has collapsed. Unless you can produce evidence to refute that testimony, I shall have to order the jury to return a verdict of acquittal for the defendant, Lois Fenton.
Most conspicuously, the episode only reveals the real killer as a kind of afterthought in the final segment because Paul and Dallas still don't know who the real murderer is. I'm wondering if the police do, but of course, it was Jasper Fenton, the no-good brother.
Once he found the horse, he meant to send a certain person to jail for forging checks.
And it was Jasper Fenton.
He just wrote a check that can only be cashed in the big house. The episode's teleplay writer, Sterling Siliphant, barely changed anything from the 1947 novel from which he drew the plot. 1. Twin dancers, one with a bouncer boyfriend named Harry, check. 2. The same murder victim and murderer, check. 3. The speech Perry gives Lois about Tehachapi, check. 4. Lois escaping in Perry's car. Well, in the novel it was at a hotel, not a ranch, but the plot is a chickadee check. Number 5. The only difference in the novel, Perry is ready to ditch Lois as a client before she steals his car, And because she steals his car, she implicates Perry as an accomplice to her crime. You get the sense from reading the book that Perry is reluctantly working on most of the cases he has, and he's working to save his own skin as much as he is his clients. The real way to get him to defend you in the novels is to make sure it's in his own best interest. If cash doesn't work, then get him into legal trouble. Now, let's get trivial, shall we? Each week in our trivia section, I give you 3 takeaways. Paul is a subject worth investigating more. Adela is something about a particular character in the story. And a Perry is something we learn about our main character. Our Paul this week concerns Sergeant Holcomb, the cop who tries to cover up his incompetence by surreptitiously passing 2 different Lois Fentons off as the same person. You may recall that we've seen Holcomb before. He was tending to the murder scene in the show's first episode, The Case of the Restless Redhead. If you remember that, you'll also see that this isn't the same actor. Rusty Westcoat plays him in this case. In episode 1, he's played by Dick Rich. Our Paul research prompt for this episode is then, what other Perry characters were portrayed by more than one actor or actress? Our Della this week concerns Irene Kilby, the Sherry Chi-Chi doppelganger, played by Judy Tyler. The scene in Kilby's apartment with her packing enough double entendres in for 3 film noirs is a definite keeper.
I took him the fans and to report that you hadn't really found the horse. Oh, he kept insisting that you had and that the fans were just a cover-up.
Tyler was just 24 when she filmed this episode, after she had spent 5 years on the Howdy Doody show, and her next project after The Case of the Fan Dancer's Horse? Just co-starring with the king himself, Elvis Presley, in his best movie, Jailhouse Rock. Unfortunately, and tragically, Tyler died in a car accident in July of 1957, before this episode even aired, or the movie was released to the public. Our Perry this week concerns our intrepid hero's musical taste. What album does he pick up to take into the record listening booth when he meets Lois for the first time? That's Michael Legrand's Castles in Spain. Olé! Perry likes his instrumental music with a bit of international flair. Legrand was a French composer. Ooh la la! Check out the posters on the shop wall when Perry first enters the store, and you'll see even more albums, including Miles Davis, released on Columbia Records, which was owned by CBS, which, you guessed it, was the station Perry Mason was aired on. Our theme for this episode is doubles. At the case's center, of course, we have 2 sets of doubles. The first is the obvious one, Lois and Irene.
This is indeed a strange situation. There's no great facial resemblance, but as far as figures are concerned, these 2 women are almost identical.
One is high class, a woman who is good at her gig, loves her brother, and listens to classical music. Just check out the Johann Strauss medley in the listening booth when Perry visits her for the first time. The other is prone to sulk, favors muscle-bound waiter types, and is generally an exhibitionist. The other pair of doubles is less obvious. We've got the fidgety young man Charles Sheldon and Lois's troublemaking brother Jasper Fenton. Sheldon is the Squaresville version of Jasper. Jasper balances his slight frame with skinny black ties, a 50s rock and roller hairdo, and an almost Jersey-ish patois. Sheldon is trying to be an adult. Just as Irene Kilby is the evil side of the fan dancing twins, so too is Jasper, the evil string bean build guy. She committed perjury so she could take Lois Fenton's spot permanently, and Jasper killed Calendar to cover up his forgery crimes. If you want to see Faulkner and Holcomb, with Faulkner the good guy and Holcomb the bad guy, you've got yourself a complete set. Now it's time for a Perry proverb. In a rare moment of vulnerability, Perry diagnoses the troubles with lawyers as he talks to Della and Paul.
You know, Paul, the trouble with lawyers, sometimes we become too skeptical.
Too skeptical, huh? The implicit rest of that sentence is that lawyers become too skeptical of their clients. Skepticism about the cops who just tried to pull a fast one on a key witness? Go right ahead. Skepticism about the DA's competence when the dude keeps on trying to convict the innocent party? You bet. Skepticism about marriage when 9/10 of these couples divorce one another or their marriage ends in murder? I'm not gonna stop ya, but my goodness, Perry cries. Skeptically examine Trag, Berger, and 92% of LA, but for sweet defendants, kind defendants, true defendants, valiant defendants, and therefore more valiant being as they are innocent defendants, please don't be skeptical of them. If you go there, you've lost more than the battle of an individual case. You've lost the justice war. Now, let's grab a swig from the water cooler.
You know, there is one thing I don't understand. Go on, Paul.
Thanks so much to those of you who gave me feedback about the last episode. My dad chimes in that the baited hook from the case of the baited hook, a $10,000 bill, featured the likeness of Abraham Lincoln's Secretary of the Treasury, Salmon P. Chase. The more you know. As always, I love feedback about this particular episode or the podcast in general. Was there something about this week's pod that you'd like to comment on or something that you'd like to correct? You can leave comments on the pod's website at theperrypod.libsyn.com or email me at theperrypod@gmail.com. You'll find those links in the show notes. Thanks again for joining me on this pod journey. Join me next time when Perry tries to put the fun back in dysfunctional family. It's the case of the demure defendant. Next time on the Perry Pod. Until then, this is Jonathan Searcy saying, keep on walking that Park Avenue beat.